just to make it easier on the media, I came over here to you guys. Realized one purchase I hadn't made in Champaign was an ice scraper. So I just did it by hand. Had some willing souls to help us around the stadium. So excited to be here. Obviously the second signing day, we're not, really adding a lot more numbers today, but I can kind of give you an update on some numbers that we added since we last met and move forward. So excited today to really add one more high school player, Matt Bailey from Moline High School, who has been on our radar since last spring. Kind of a great story, just the way I always tell kids in recruiting, every story is unique, right? Everybody's recruiting story is your story. Don't try to pay attention to anybody else's. Don't look around at what's going around you. Just worry about where you are. And Matthew's been a definition of that. Came to us last spring, worked out with us in the summer. Went on to have an outstanding senior year, and just really excited to get to where we are with him. And then one other guy that's kind of an unusual signing, Zai Christler. Zai was a guy that we became aware of last year during our bye week. I was in Mississippi Gulf Coast recruiting a pool of people that were available to sign that year, and it became clear into my film study that Zai, who was on the field to get evaluated, was very impressed with who he was putting him down on a list to get recruited next year, but just through some inquiry and conversations found out that he was a full qualifier out of high school. So although he was in a junior college mix, everybody just assumed he was there as a non-qualifier, but it turns out he was a full qualifier. Really pursued that before anybody else got a hold of it, and that kind of led us to where we are with him. We got him in the middle of the winter cycle, during the winter break when our players are there, got him on campus and got him enrolled. That's why he didn't have an official signing, because he was a full qualifier at high school, went to Mississippi Gulf Coast, and then we worked him into the university here and had him admitted and started classes that first week. So that's how he kind of attritioned in. I know a lot of you are probably trying to figure that out, but an outstanding young man, very excited. So I thought I'd show you guys kind of like we did. Won't be as long as last time. I know we had a lot of players to go through last time, but first with Matthew. So the part that I'm really intrigued with Matt is you see him walk up here and you're going to see the circle kind of bring him into the line of scrimmage. The one thing Matt does is he has a lot of versatility. I don't know if he's going to play on the back end. I don't know if he's going to play in here. Eventually he may be an outside linebacker type. I think he has a wide receiver traits. He also has possibility of growing into the ability of being actually a tight end as well, right? So I kind of gave you 4 different clips here of him being just a very productive football player. Had all kinds of recognition in his high school as well as his conference. Here you see him coming. He just got an instinct to walk down into it. Has a really good feel for the game. I think as much as he played in a variety of different positions, the versatility, the length, the athleticism, his mental and physical presence just get me excited as a guy that we're excited to add into the program here. So there he was at linebacker. Here's another good example. Here you're going to see he really has some good presence and awareness. You see him pointing in here. One thing that comes out when you're talking to his high school coaches, all the people that competed against him. He's from the Quad City area, which is an area that I obviously grew up in. Just everybody in that community talked about just who he was and what he is and the presence that he brings. So I love the fact you can see him literally talking with communication with his hands, right? Telling everybody what to be aware of. He's got great QB awareness on both sides of the ball. What I would just say, people that understand the game in the big picture. So you see him pointing the things out. You're going to see him stemming out here right before the snap. We got an extra large width out here to the field. You see him get to the leverage point, get his body in position. I'm sure if this guy took off, he'd have to take him. He reads, reacts, and comes up here and just does to the edge of the defense and just does a nice job of understanding the play overall. Here you're going to see him in the middle of the field playing a safety position. So literally the third position you'll see him play on defense. Here you see him playing over top of number 2. Does a great job of getting his vertical depth, understands, reads, reacts, makes a play on the ball. Really good ball skills in all aspects of the game. Excited to get him in here. Then this last one, this is just as a punt returner, right? So a lot of times, what do you put on as your punt returner? You put your best athlete back there who has great ball skills and great awareness. Here you see him take the ball off the foot, catches the ball literally with a guy on him, on top of him, wasn't deterred, extremely confident in his skill set. Here you see him now continue to do some things after the ball. Just great presence, great awareness. Again, just a guy that I can't wait. This is for me, right, as the head coach here at Illinois, I said from day one, we're going to recruit the state of Illinois. We're going to bring good football players in here. I don't really care who's recruiting, who's not recruiting. They got to fit the bill for what we are. And really winding down the recruiting season here, we had set aside a few scholarships for portal players, some guys that we felt that maybe had a little bit more age and experience. But when the opportunity came to grab Matt here at the end, I know Coach Walters went over to the high school. Coach Pat Ryan was heavily involved in staying on top of this during the whole time, talking to his high school coaches in the area. He was a player of the year in the conference, offense, defense, special teams. This is the definition of what we're looking for, right? A guy with length, a guy with athleticism, a guy with great football IQ, an incredible person off the field as well. So really excited to have Matt join us. So Zai here is actually a guy that comes to us in an unusual fashion. He comes from Crystal Springs, Mississippi, but also went to Copiah High School and Copiah Academy actually, and then went to Mississippi Gulf Coast for a year. When I went, I always kind of decided that as a head coach, I can only go to a home visit one time, right? As an assistant, they're allowed to go several times. So Saturday night, I went to his hometown, right? And it's the first time this ever happened. There's about 40 people in this little restaurant where we gathered, and the mayor of his hometown was there, right? I've been in this business 15 years as a head coach, almost 30 years as an assistant. I've never met a mayor at a recruiting dinner, all right? So that spoke volumes of, I think, what kind of person we're getting. He's a guy with unbelievable athleticism. Every person that was in that visit Saturday night, whether it was high school basketball coach, his assistant basketball coach, his English teacher, the mayor, all of his family, just talked about what kind of person we're getting here. And what you're going to see is we're also getting a phenomenal big athlete, right? So here he is at left tackle. He plays a little bit of left and right tackle. Extremely athletic. Reminds me a lot of linemen that I saw in the SEC. A big, strong body. You see those, I know they're not little, right? But in proportion, his calves, right? He's got nice, tight, small calves. And he's very athletic, great change of direction, can set down on a heartbeat. And this isn't just average players. He's playing against Mississippi Gulf Coast, is known as one of the better JC programs in the country, the people they're playing against. This is what I love, all right? He actually popped in at right tackle, all right, as well. So we played both left and right tackle. Their left tackle was a player that signed in the SEC. So when he was injured or suspended from a game, Zai popped over at left tackle and was actually as functional, if not even better. So he's got great versatility, playing both left and right. Here you see just his ability. So a lot of times these guys he's going against are smaller, quicker, more nimble athletes. And what you see is he gets engaged. And then most big people, right, when they play, right, big athletes tend to stop their feet when they begin to move or slow their feet down. They can't accelerate. They can't maintain power in transition. And what you see here is he stays on his feet. Even though it's a smaller body, he's got the athleticism to stay on him, stay engaged, and give an opportunity for that running back to get through there and have a scoring opportunity. Like, that's not normal. Most linemen kind of stumble, fall, and maintain. And when you're recruiting big athletes like we're seeing here, right, one of the things you love to watch is what they do after the play, how they chase, how they run, how they stay on their feet, the athletic opportunity that they have, right? So here he is at right tackle again. Again, he clears the path, and then what you're going to see him just take off, run it like he's a very, very athletic big man, right? He was a guy that at one point weighed over 420 pounds in his life, right? He's down to about 370 that we see on film here, right? And he's just a guy that every time I called Zai, he's into basketball, playing basketball. He's outside doing something outside. He's not inside on video games. He's always doing something athletic. Like, here's another great example, right? Nice vertical set. He's got extremely long arms. He's a 6'6", 6'7" guy with equal length. He's really, from an NFL standpoint, his measurables are incredible, all right, what he truly has. So very excited to get Zai into the program. Tank shared with me a story the other day, right? So he was in one of his first conditioning sessions, and he's a big guy, right? I can understand that as well, right? Sometimes things don't come easy. So he was doing a little bit of prowler work and wasn't able to finish what he needed to get done. So he dismissed the group, and Zai went in, got a drink of water, did a U-turn, came back out, and told Tank, "Let's go get that work, right? Let's finish what I wasn't able to get done." So a guy that is extremely talented, very athletic, and excited to get him here. A couple guys I can't show film on, but we added. There's a rule a year ago, 2 years ago, Joe, was it, when we decided as a college football power to let all of us have access to everybody's film, right? So we have access to literally every person's film in college football. So like the PFF world for our portals, we have access to every team, like everybody does, right? So one of the things that is a byproduct of that is when we sign a transfer, we can't use film from other schools. So we gained Tommy DeVito, who obviously is coming to us from Syracuse. You've all been able to see his film. But the last time we get together, I couldn't talk about Tommy. You can't really talk about transfers until they've matriculated into your program and started classes. So Tommy's been in our classes from the get-go. Really last fall, during the course of fall, especially when Art became injured and we knew he was going to have surgery with the departure of BP. We were really low on veteran, experienced quarterbacks. So we were looking for an ideal guy to have a one-for-one, a guy that we felt could come in and give us depth. He's not the same eligibility factor as Art. He's not the same eligibility factor as anybody else in our program. And then, of course, we're having Donovan Leary come in. So I was really excited when I came across Tommy's film. Came from a high school program, Bergen Catholic, that is a phenomenal program. Was very well known. And Tommy, when I watched his film, just was excited about his arm talent, his ability to be on the field. But then when you meet him, he's a guy, I'm sure that you guys have seen the videos, doesn't really lack confidence, very proud to be from North Jersey, and everything from A to Z. When I went into his home and met with him and his parents, just was very impressed with his demeanor and been a great addition. I know from our guys, we haven't been able to watch him throw as coaches, but our players have been having voluntary workout sessions. They're very, very impressed, very complimentary about Tommy and where he is. He actually knew Art from back in the day, and just a lot of good connections as we go forward. And then T-Rod Edwards is a young man that we've joined, who actually comes to us from just outside of Columbus, from Northwestern as a transfer student. And now Tommy was a grad transfer, so he comes in as a grad transfer, immediately eligible to play. T-Rod obviously had spent a couple years at Northwestern and joins us now as a pure portal transfer. So he came in, joined us, was in on our very last visit weekend, and then we're able to get him and start him in school as classes started. So he's here on campus running full speed ahead. So really, we signed 22 high school players, right? 22 high school players. 11 of those players came from the state of Illinois. Those 22 players, I believe, Pat, how many we got? 8 on campus? Is it 8 or 9? 10. 10 players that graduated from high school early and came to campus. So a really good combination there of players like we set out to do, good players from the state of Illinois. Also, we're able to get them in school a semester early so they can be a part of our program during the spring through spring semester and a jump start into the summer and of course next fall. In addition to the 22 high school players, we signed 2 junior college players, we signed 2 transfer players, and then we also added 5 PWOs, right? 5 preferred walk-ons that have come to us either out of high school or from another college experience that are on our campus right now as we go forward. So really that's about it. From a program standpoint, open up for questions. The thing I would share with you is, as this thing unfolded, I gave kudos last time to our recruiting department, but also to assemble this staff from Josh and his administration, what they allowed us to do from campus, what they allowed us to do with admissions and housing. There's a lot of things that have changed, in my opinion, for the better, that have really made it a more accessible opportunity for us to get student athletes in here and represent Illinois in the right way, and I'm forever thankful for that as well. So with that, I'll open up for questions.
Coach, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, Coach.
You're good.
This used to be the day.
Mm-hmm.
You signed 25 guys and big deal, all fired up. It's not like that anymore. How do you feel about how that changed?
I absolutely personally love it. I was actually just talking to, I spoke in the last 48 hours to a couple Division I football coaches across the country in our conference and in others. And one of the things we've been kind of talking about is there's been some discussions about changing back to this date or somewhere in between. I think without a doubt to stay in December. Now there was a little bit of a discussion in our head coaches meetings at the AFC, at the American Football Coaches Association, to maybe move the December signing date back a week, which I could actually understand that, because it'll allow you a little bit more time in December for teams that are playing in a championship game to get out on the road and do things. But I really hope we stay with the December period. If it gets moved back a week, I'm fine. But what it doesn't, what prevents is if we didn't sign those guys in December. So all those 21 players that we signed in December, we would have had to been recruiting them all through January, right? And it just, it's cost effective, it's time effective. It allows kids that know where they want to go to sign and be done with it, and they don't have people beating down their doors. I think it just makes a lot of sense. If we don't want to have two, I don't know what the common ground is, but it really allowed January to be very productive for the 2023 class. It's just a much more efficient way of doing things, and I'm all in favor of keeping it in the December window.
Bret, this is such a numbers game of adding talent to your roster. 22 prep kids, I believe, a couple transfers. How do you balance, how do you approach, how does it evolve of how you want to split that up, especially this year?
It's a great, when I took this job, I know you guys have heard me say this, I told Josh there's probably not a better time to try and take over a program than, as ironically as it was during COVID, for a lot of different reasons. Being able to stay on campus, recruit, it was kind of a fair playing field. It allowed me to get a jump on my staff. But one of the byproducts that's been a negative, right, is the super senior class. But everybody worries about every kid that was here on campus during COVID, as well as everywhere in the country, gets a bonus year. So they gave us relief this past year where it was kind of all those super seniors were free, right? Well, now it's 25 plus 7, right? So we had our 25 signees, plus you had 7 that you could sign if you had guys either enter the portal or declare for the NFL draft early. And we got that number, so we'd have 32 available for us. But for us, and I know a couple of you really follow this, right? We had 32, but we've counted 4 forward from last year. So with Noviak, Kanena, we had 4 guys that we blue shirted that go to this class that we're in right now. So that dropped us to 28. So those 28 is now what we're working off of as we go forward, right? So it is a numbers game. I think that next year I would be very surprised if we don't go to the 25 plus 1. So basically, if you lose a player either through portal or to the NFL draft, you'll be able to complement that, right? Because the biggest disadvantage we have, right now is, for us personally, I won't be able to get to 85. I won't be able to get to 85 even under the plus 7 because of the players that have either attritioned or that I've attritioned out of here. That 32. Even with the 32 signees, won't quite get us to 85. Now it's good because you can reward walk-ons, but I think it's an unfair playing field for a college, whether it be here at the University of Illinois or really anywhere, if you can't get to 85. It just makes no sense to me. So I had actually proposed that we would go to just purely 85. Everybody's got 85. I don't care if you sign 55 in 1 year. If you got them, you should be able to sign them, all right? I know everybody gets, scared with running people off and where it's at, but I know I've never run a kid off. I think the integrity of the game, you'd hope that would happen. That's maybe not always the case in every place that I've ever been around or I've witnessed, but my guess is the number that we come to next year will be a little bit more user-friendly to get to 85 total.
And just follow up on that, how much do you guys plan to be in the portal now to add to the 22 roster, and how much is Blue Shirts playing to you trying to get to 85?
We will do blue shirts. We've already explored that. I'm sure the guys that really follow it know what I'm talking about. But I do think, today, I had 3 guys that I watched before we came here today that just went in the portal, right? And we're going to always constantly look, for positions of needs. To me, I'm not an overload into the portal, just sell your soul and do all that. I think we're a development program. I think here at Illinois, you want to develop high school players and put them in position. You have to constantly recruit your team, right? Like there's never been a point in college football where it's more important to not only cultivate your starters, but who your number 2 is and who your number 3 is, who, it might be your 3rd string right tackle this year. He might be your starting left tackle next year, right? And it's very important to recruit the roster that we currently have, but we'll always use the portal as a supplement to a position of need, i.e. Tommy DeVito, right? Just because we really lacked a quarterback that had a significant amount of playing experience. If Art, all right, and when he comes back and everything's going great in his recovery, but I couldn't leverage an entire football team under the assumption that I've either got to have a true freshman or sophomore come in and play if Art wasn't ready to go next fall. But all indications are he's going to be, but I didn't want to just have it all hanging on one person.
To follow up on that with
Yep.
the portal, we saw like Mel Tucker at Michigan State this year essentially completely rebuild his roster and have a lot of success through the transfer portal with guys like Kenneth Walker. How difficult was it for you to balance, I want to go through the portal and get good really, really quickly, and also developmental program, get the kids, build my roster through the high school talent?
I can't count on anybody else. I come in on Illinois, right? So we say and preach family a lot, right? So I went into that opening team meeting and expressed that I wanted to see, and I have an opportunity for anybody who's in that room to come back. So that probably drove that message more than anything. I think if you're dealing with portals, for me, right, and what we do here at Illinois, if I have a young man walk through that door as a freshman, I think everybody kind of assumes there's going to be a transition, right? He comes in, he's been raised by a certain set of parents or a community or a church or his high school, and there's going to be growth. But when you bring in a player like Tommy, right? Like Tommy comes in, like I did a lot of back end, conversations, a lot of research on him and who he was, and really did my research, because when you bring in a guy with 1 year of eligibility, they better represent what you believe in, because you don't have a lot of time to adapt them. So I think it's important for those portal players to come in and represent what you really believe in, because those younger players are going to automatically look to them and say, oh, that must be what Coach B wants, right? And so for that reason, we're not going wholesale, but I think the byproduct will be pretty good. I think you want to look at this, right? So history repeats itself. I say that all the time. I've done a presentation every recruiting weekend. I talk about it with our players. So the last time Illinois signed 11 players from the state of Illinois was 2003, right? This is the most that we've signed since 2003. 2003 was the birth of the recruiting class of 2007, which was the last last Rose Bowl team that played here. If you go through that 2003 signing class, you look at the players that came from Illinois and were a catalyst to that 2007 team that obviously did some really good things. There's a lot of commonalities to what we're trying to do here, and I don't think Illinois has changed all that much to draw that comparison, right? Which is what I think I'm looking for, and what Josh and I have always talked about: sustained success. I didn't want to have a flash in the pan. I wanted to build something with a great foundation.
When you talked about Sean Miller a couple months ago or whatever, you mentioned you had a need wide receiver, you signed him, you spotted him, you did this. With someone like Matthew Bailey, maybe he's a safety, maybe he's a linebacker, maybe he's a tight end. How do you approach that with a class of some guys are slotted, some guys are athletes, and we'll figure it out?
Yeah, Robert. It's really just kind of like you said. Like, so we went in to last year with a number that we knew we had, right? Didn't know how the year was going to pan out as far as if we were going to have transfers or numbers that would adjust. So we kind of had a set number of, this is the number of wide receivers, right? And to be honest, that number was 3. We ended up going to 4 because of who we could get our hands on, right? I think there's a certain element, especially here during the infancy of our program, that you got to take good players you feel fit your program, and you might have to skew your numbers a little bit here and there. I had intended to only take 4 high school offensive linemen, but when Mountis came and had the opportunity to join us, I jumped it to 5 because I thought we needed another high school development tackle that has great length and good power and a good skill set. And there's all the way around. I mean, the first time I watched James Kreutz, like he didn't fit our numbers, right? But the more I watched him, the more I talked to Coach Holisek, and the more I talked to the coaches that competed against him, I'm like, I need James Kreutz in my program, right? Even though his numbers didn't fit, that young man fit everything that we embody, and I'm convinced of that more now than ever after being in his home and being around his parents. It was kind of cool, obviously, because we have Josh here, right? And we're able to recruit him that way. So I think as a head coach, you always got to be aware of when you got a player that really fits what your DNA is.
Brett, with Tommy, what initially stood out about the full body of work with him, and then how did you navigate an offensive coordinator / quarterback coach change kind of in the middle of his process?
Yeah, great observation, right? So if you follow the timeline of how that all happened, you realize I had a couple of things in the air that the only other person to do it was me, right? I knew at some point when a transition was going to take place, we were involved in the end of the first wave of recruiting, all the things that were taking place around us, and I think the part that I really enjoyed about Tommy, like a lot of times I take things personally, right, and I'll start to reach out. So once Pat Embleton and the recruiting staff at the personnel department brought me Tommy, and we kind of made a decision. This is a road that we're going to explore. I reached out to people I knew at Syracuse, people that were there at Syracuse when he was there last year versus when they were there 2 years ago. Watched film from every year, you know, that he was there, and really just began to do it personally. That first week of live recruiting, I was the one that went in the home with Coach Bart Miller, because we were recruiting Matt Fries out there, so we swung into the home. So it just made it about the University of Illinois and for me as a head coach. So when I made transition, you know, the first home that I sent Coach Lunny in was to Donovan's. You know, so sent him to Donovan Leary, and when I made transition, the first phone call I made that day was to Donovan Leary's father, right? Because after being in at home, I knew how much weight the family had and where it was. So I reached out to his father first, told him what I had planned to do that day and how I was going to transition, and explained it to him. And I said, now you tell me, like, do you want to sit down and tell your son? I want to do it myself, but you tell me how to handle this moment. And it was pretty much the same way then with dealing with Tommy. I went into home, got to know that it was the first time I was able to see him face to face by NCAA rules. It was the first time. So I developed a relationship with him. When I made transition, I called, his dad's name is Tom. Again, I realized how strong of a father figure he was and how much Tommy leaned on him. So I called his father, and we walked through it, talked through it as a family, and then he expressed it to Tommy, and then I talked to both Tommy and Donovan that night. So we'll see how it works out, but I think it's worked out very well to this point.
With blue shirts, how do you strike a balance there where maybe not hurting yourself in the next recruiting class to maybe fill some spots in the previous one?
Well, I think it's really, you know, 25 is the standard that, you know, the NCAA is giving you for, you know, recruiting. And you can always sign a class of 25. I just think to find a hit on 25 is going to be a little bit hard to realistically think you're going to find 25 great players in a recruiting class. So if we can steal from and move them forward, especially this portal board, look at Jack Badodiak, right? Like, I know we, you know, we're not happy with the 5 and 17, but Jack was critical and essential for us to get to where we needed to be, and he was a great use of a black shirt. Kanena Udalaga, I know you guys haven't seen him yet, but I'm very excited that we got him as a blue shirt opportunity. The way I see it is we're really taking a scholarship from, like, next year. If I blue shirt somebody now, what I'm doing is I'm basically taking a scholarship from the 23 signing class because I have faith in the 22 that I have right now. That's how I view it. I don't really see it as taking one. I just see it as I'm building my roster all the time. And sometimes blue shirts you take with the idea, they might be able to help us this year, but I think this kid finds another, you know, maybe not a ready-made DB, but he could be a ready-made outside linebacker in a year and a half, right? That's how I kind of see it. Or you have a transfer portal player who there's just too many portal players that can't have scholarships right now, and the blue shirt is the only opportunity that they have to get on the field. So it kind of works for us in both ways.
How critical, Brett, is your preferred walk-on program that you want to have here? And it seems like everywhere you've been, you've had success with that.
Yeah.
With certain players, and it just seems like you're kind of trying to do that here again.
Again, it's a partnership with Josh, right? So one of the first things that became clear to me here when I got here was their roster size was at about a 110 on maintaining. And every place I'd been at, the number was 120. And that was critical because you have 85 scholarship players, right? And now that gives you 35 players to bring in as walk-ons. So Josh and the university has allowed us to grow that roster a little bit. We'll be close to that number to 120 than ever before, and that allows us to bring in some great, in my opinion, PWOs, right? You're from Illinois, you have a lot of development type kids, you have players that you know, can literally become recruiting erasers, right? Guys that erase recruiting mistakes, guys that maybe become injured, guys that you were counting on this guy to be a position X and he ends up moving to position Z, and now you can fill that in with a walk-on. I look at Mike Marquez, right? I didn't get a chance to talk about him before. Mike started as a walk-on in this program. After I moved him to tight end, like literally every week, I'm like, how do we get this guy involved in the game plan? What do we do? How do we do it? There's a play against Penn State where he's lined up at fullback. He played fullback for 2 weeks, and he takes a very, very good football player and blocks him 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and his excitement and anticipation of that play was infectious to everybody else. So, and then, you know, we designed certain plays later on in the year. Everything good happens when Mike was on the field. So that's when we made an appeal to the NCAA, and now I've got Mike back for another year because he basically missed 4 games during that COVID year. No one had asked the question. I just said, well, why can't he redshirt that year, right? Because he had never redshirted. So it led us to the opportunity to bring him back, and we got one more trick up our sleeve that we're trying to work right now, and I think if we get that one, it'll be a double jeopardy good effect. So we're excited. The PWOs, for me, they didn't call me a PWO back then. They called me a walk-on. And I was number 9 on the depth chart, and you know, 2 weeks into it, I was ahead of, I believe, 4 of the 5 guys that I came in with, because sometimes recruiting stars don't mean that much. I'm not saying that's the case with everything, but I think for a lot of guys, undersized, underdeveloped, and under-recruited can be a good phrase.
Coach, kind of a loaded question, but
Yours are always loaded.
last time you were in college football, the transfer portal didn't exist, and you kind of mentioned there's not an opportunity for every player in the portal to get a scholarship. Can you just explain your entire feelings toward the portal and what it means?
Listen, I think the portal's a great thing, right? So when we have guys in that we're showing visits, so my first portal player was a guy by the name of J.J. Watt, right? He was a guy that was coming from a MAC school that wanted to return to his home state. That was a non-scholarship player, and obviously it worked out well for a lot of people, right? My first true portal player, grad transfer, was Russell Wilson, right? So even though we weren't using it back then, those were the same exact things we're doing now, and I think it gives a great opportunity for a guy that's in a bad or a situation that's not good for him, right? So I'll never forget getting Russ and talking to him, and I watched his NC State film, and then I talked to him on the phone, and you know he's actually traveling as a pro baseball player, and we're talking about Motown and Aretha Franklin and all this stuff, and I'm like, this is kind of cool recruiting an older kid where you don't have to talk about you know how cool shoes we're gonna wear or what graphic he's gonna get. Like he was an adult, right? He's a grown ass man, and he makes good decisions, right? So the portal thing, I think, allows kids that maybe because of a coaching change, maybe because of even a coordinator change, right? Or maybe they got misled during the recruiting process and they're looking for a new home. It gives guys an opportunity to do that. Now I'm not going to be oblivious too, right? We've had a number of players enter the portal. I would say that every player that's entered the portal to this point has been a healthy conversation between me and them, right? And I think anything that helps our players be able to chase their dreams higher is I'm going to encourage them to do everything we can. There's going to be, I think, you know, it'd be fair to say that there's an unknown to this whole thing, right? Because you know, I think kids can get misled in the portal. I get very concerned about the rules around portals, right? Like you can't talk to a kid till he's in the portal, but there's a lot of gray area that's coming into it that concerns me. That I just think the integrity of the game, especially in our conference, concerns me. But I think overall, it's a very positive thing for everybody involved.
Bret, O-line, obviously, had 2 JUCOs that maybe can help you right away. Isaiah, tackle, but Zylan, where's short-term, long-term, do you kind of see him fitting in and competing for you next year?
Yeah, I told Isaiah and Zai both. I mean, to me, they can play 4 of the 5 offensive line positions. They both have played guard. They both have played tackle. Fortunately for them, both of them have tackle measurables, right, and guard ability. Kind of tell different 2 cities. Isaiah, I know you haven't seen him yet, but Isaiah, you know, you're going to see him, and he obviously has good weight, but he's going to appear thin to you, and I think he's going to be a growing body. Where Zai, you're going to see him, and you're going to be like, he's a big dude, right? And we can bring him down a little bit, but I don't think we want to bring him down unnecessarily fast. I think it has to be on good terms where he's at. Julian Pearl, you know, has played tackle and really don't have a lot of other guys that have reps at tackle, so I would say it's more tackle to guard, but we'll see where our numbers are at.
We'll wrap up with Scott here.
Is there something you like in particular about Jersey quarterbacks? Now that you got 3.
You know, I get it. Strictly just you know, coincidence. I think, you know, it wasn't like we set out to sign Jersey kids. I've always, every program I've ever been involved, back when I was a student athlete at the University of Iowa, my roommate across the hall was Dana Hughes, who's from Bayonne, New Jersey, and he was I think maybe one of the last players that played for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Royals, and I realized how good a player he was right now, especially in retrospect. So I was Mike Ferroni, who was from Union High School, was my next door neighbor. Tony Stewart was a great tailback. So when we were at Wisconsin, there's all these Jersey players. And then when I went to the University of Wisconsin, there was a huge Jersey influence there as well, going back to Coach Alvarez's time, who hired Bernie Wyatt. So every program that I've seen kind of firsthand in the Big Ten has had a huge Jersey influence. And then I hired Andy Boo, and one of our first conversations, he's like, Coach, I'd really like to go knee deep in Jersey. At the time I lived in Jersey. I was at Tenafly, New Jersey with the Giants, and just realized how good a football was out there, and how many of them are out there that don't really necessarily want to be on the East Coast anymore. They like to flock to the Big Ten in the Midwest. So Art kind of came about just really because of the transfer portal. Donovan came about because he was one of the best players that we saw that we offered a scholarship to, and now Tommy just happened to be from Syracuse, and as he's very proud to say, he's from North Jersey. So I haven't quite figured out the geographical locations of every place in Jersey, but I understand it means a lot to them. But no, I think I've been around and played with a lot of Jersey people who are very proud people, right? And I think that bodes well for our program here. But no, there's no conscientious effort of quarterbacks, I promise you.
All right, thank you.